Hey Reddit, I need an outsider's perspective on this. I, 32, female, and my husband, 34, male, let's call him Mark, have been married for 7 years. Mark comes from a close-knit family. His mom, mother-in-law, is 45, and his sister-in-law, is 28. I've had a decent relationship with my in-laws, though my mother-in-law has her moments of being overbearing. A little background. When Mark and I got married, we dreamed of having kids. We started trying immediately, but after a year with no luck, we consulted a fertility specialist. We were shattered when we found out that I have PCOS, which made conceiving naturally nearly impossible for me. Over the next 5 years, our lives became a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, hormone treatments, and heartbreaking negative pregnancy tests. Our relationship was strained, not because we blamed each other, but because we felt incomplete. We saw friends having kids, and every baby shower felt like a punch in the gut. Finally, we decided to try IVF. We had to take loans as it was expensive and our insurance didn't cover it. We went through 2 failed cycles. I was depressed, exhausted, and just about ready to give up. However, something miraculous happened on our third attempt. I got pregnant. We were over the moon. We cried, laughed, and held each other like we hadn't in years. This was our little miracle. We decided to announce the news at a family gathering. Mark's family has always been big on gatherings and announcements. When we got engaged, we announced it at a family barbecue. So we thought this would be the perfect setting to share our joy. I was a mixed bag of emotions, excited, nervous, and anxious. We planned an intimate brunch at our home. I spent days planning the menu, decorating the house, and thinking about how to make the announcement. On the day of the gathering, our close family members came over. My parents, Mark's parents, his sister, and a few aunts and uncles. Mother-in-law seemed in high spirits. I could see she suspected something because of all the efforts we put into the brunch. As everyone settled in the living room, I took a deep breath. My heart was racing. Mark held my hand and we stood in front of our family. Mark started with a speech about our journey and how much family means to us. I held up a tiny pair of baby shoes and with my voice shaking, announced, "We're finally going to be parents." Everyone cheered, but I noticed my mother-in-law had tears streaming down her face. At that moment, I thought she was just overwhelmed with happiness for us. We hugged our family members as they congratulated us. My heart was full. I felt like after years of pain and struggle, we were finally here, surrounded by love. But as the day went on, I noticed sister-in-law seemed distant. She was usually the life of the party, but today she hardly spoke. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just emotional too. In hindsight, I couldn't have been more wrong about the entire situation. As the afternoon progressed, everyone enjoyed the delicious food and shared stories. My mother-in-law was still quite emotional, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief every now and then. I felt a warmth towards her, thinking she was just so happy for us. I mingled and chatted with everyone, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with my sister-in-law. She was usually vibrant and chatty, but today she was silent and barely made eye contact with me. After lunch, we gathered in the living room again for coffee and dessert. My mother-in-law, who had been relatively quiet, seemed to be preparing herself to say something. My heart swelled, thinking she would give a heartfelt speech about becoming a grandmother. I went to the kitchen to get the coffee ready. My sister-in-law followed me in. It seemed like she had finally decided to talk to me. She appeared nervous as she started to speak. "Listen, I need to talk to you about Mom." My heart skipped a beat. "What's wrong? Is she okay?" I asked. "She's fine, but—" She hesitated. Mom was planning to announce her pregnancy today. I nearly dropped a coffee pot. Wait, what? She's pregnant and she thinks this is her moment, her miracle. She's 45 and didn't think she could have more kids. She wants the spotlight for this. I stood there, stunned. I couldn't process what she just said. My mind was racing. The tears from my mother-in-law suddenly made sense, but not in the way I thought. Sister-in-law continued, I think you should have waited to announce your pregnancy, maybe plan for the baby sometime later, let mom have this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she suggesting that I should sideline my long-awaited happiness for mother-in-law's announcement? I had struggled for years, and my baby was a miracle too. I stammered, but we didn't know. Sister-in-law just shrugged. Well, now you do. Maybe you could announce later or throw a separate party for your baby. My emotions were all over the place. I was hurt, confused, and angry. As we re-entered the living room, I saw my mother-in-law standing in front of everyone, tears streaming down her face as she announced her pregnancy. The room erupted in astonishment and congratulations. My own announcement felt like a distant memory as everyone surrounded mother-in-law, calling it a miracle. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Mark. He looked at me questioningly. My eyes welled up with tears as I whispered to him what sister-in-law had told me. We looked at each other, our own joy overshadowed and tarnished. That's when we decided it was time to leave our own gathering early. After we got home, I couldn't help but break down. Mark held me as I sobbed uncontrollably. We were supposed to be celebrating the happiest day of our lives, but instead, we were sitting in our living room, our joy stolen from us. I told Mark everything that sister-in-law had said in the kitchen. His face contorted with a mix of disbelief and anger. That's absurd, he exclaimed. Our baby is just as much of a miracle as hers. We've been through hell and back to get here. We discussed our options. Should we confront mother-in-law and sister-in-law? Should we let it go? Our emotions were running high, and we decided it would be best to sleep on it and see how we felt in the morning. The next day, we woke up to a flurry of texts and calls from family members congratulating mother-in-law on her pregnancy. Our announcement seemed to be completely overshadowed. My heart ached as I read through the messages. I had waited so long for this day, and now it felt like it was ripped away from me. Mark suggested we take a walk. As we strolled through the park, I couldn't help but feel like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The fresh air was invigorating, and for a moment I felt at peace. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a text from sister-in-law. I hope you understand why Mom needed this day. Maybe you can announce your pregnancy later and let her have her moment. I felt a rage building inside me. My hands were shaking as I showed the text to Mark. This is unbelievable, he said, clenching his fists. We decided that we couldn't let this go. Our baby deserved to be celebrated just as much as any other, and we deserved the support and happiness of our family. When we got back home, I called my sister-in-law. Listen, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I understand that your mom's pregnancy is a big deal, but so is ours. We should be supporting each other, not tearing each other down. Sister-in-law went silent for a moment before replying. I just think it's a shame that you had to take this away from her. She's waited so long for this. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We've waited long too. We've struggled too, I retorted. Our baby is just as important. I hung up the phone, tears streaming down my face. Mark and I knew that we needed to have a face-to-face talk with mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Our family was at stake, and we couldn't let this tear us apart. But little did I know that this was just the beginning of the emotional roller coaster that was about to unfold. Mark and I decided we needed to clear our heads before talking to mother-in-law and sister-in-law. We spent the evening alone, cherishing our little family-to-be. However, my emotions were a whirlwind. I felt robbed, hurt, and strangely guilty for feeling that way. We decided to meet mother-in-law and sister-in-law 2 days later. Before that, I reached out to my own mother for advice. She had always been my rock, and right now I needed her wisdom. When I told her the story, she was silent for a moment and then said, "Honey, your miracle deserves to be celebrated. Don't let anyone dim your light." Her words gave me the strength I needed. Mark and I discussed what we wanted to say to mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and we agreed that we wouldn't let them overshadow our joy. The day arrived when we were to meet mother-in-law and sister-in-law at mother-in-law's house. We were nervous but determined. As we walked into the living room, I saw that mother-in-law had already set up a crib and various baby items. It felt like a slap in the face. Mother-in-law greeted us coldly and we sat down. I took a deep breath and began. "We're here because we need to talk about what happened during our announcement." Mother-in-law interrupted. "Yes, that was supposed to be my day. I can't believe you chose that day to announce your pregnancy." I was shocked by her bluntness. "We didn't know you were pregnant," I replied. "We've been trying for years and this was our moment too. Your grandchild is also a miracle." Mother-in-law rolled her eyes. "Well, you could have had your moment another day." Mark, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "Mom, we're happy for you, but that doesn't mean our joy should be less. Our child is as important as the one you're expecting. We need to support each other." Mother-in-law just huffed. Sister-in-law chimed in. "You should have just waited. Mom's older. This is probably her last chance." Tears welled up in my eyes. I looked at them and said, "Every baby is a blessing. This should be a time for our family to come together, not be torn apart. I hoped you would be happy for us as we are for you." Mother-in-law and sister-in-law didn't respond. They just looked at each other. Mark stood up. "If you can't be happy for us and support us, then I don't know how we can be a family." We walked out of the house hand in hand. The ride home was silent. When we got home, I realized that we may have lost part of our family, but we still had each other, and soon our baby. Little did I know that this was just the beginning, and our family dynamic was about to change forever. In the days that followed our confrontation with mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I couldn't help but feel an emptiness in my heart. I had imagined my pregnancy surrounded by love and family, and now that dream seemed shattered. Mark was my rock during this time. He reminded me that we still had my side of the family and our friends who were ecstatic for us. About 2 weeks later, I received a call from one of Mark's aunts, Aunt Laura. She had heard about what happened and wanted to hear our side of the story. I explained everything to her, from our struggles with fertility to how mother-in-law and sister-in-law reacted to our announcement. Aunt Laura was sympathetic and told me that she understood our pain. She also revealed that she had struggled with infertility in her youth and knew the emotional toll it takes. She told me she would talk to mother-in-law and sister-in-law and try to make them understand our perspective. In the meantime, Mark and I started attending prenatal classes and preparing our home for our little one. We found joy in choosing nursery colors, picking out baby clothes, and imagining our lives as parents. One evening, as we were setting up the crib, I received a call from Aunt Laura. She explained that she had spoken to mother-in-law and sister-in-law. She had shared her own experiences and tried to make them understand how their actions had hurt us. She also shared stories of other family members who had been through similar experiences to humanize our struggles. There was a family gathering coming up, and Aunt Laura suggested that maybe this could be an opportunity for us all to start fresh. Mark and I talked it over and decided that for the sake of family and our child, we should give it a shot. The day of the gathering arrived. We were anxious but hopeful. As we entered mother-in-law's house, we felt the atmosphere was different this time. People seemed more aware of the tensions that had occurred and were more sensitive. My mother-in-law approached me hesitantly. She seemed different, less defensive. She took a deep breath and said, I've been doing some thinking. I didn't realize how much you have struggled. I was selfish. Can you forgive me? I was taken aback. I hadn't expected her to apologize. I felt tears in my eyes as I nodded. We hugged, and it felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. Later, sister-in-law approached me too. She seemed remorseful and admitted that she hadn't considered our feelings. We spent the day sharing stories, laughing, and even crying a little. Our family felt like a unit again. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and I could never have imagined the twist that awaited us next. Weeks went by, and Mark and I were engrossed in preparing for our baby. Mother-in-law and I started building a bond. She would call me to share her experiences and sometimes ask how I was doing. Then a twist of fate turned our lives upside down. One evening, Mark got a frantic call from sister-in-law. Mother-in-law was in the hospital. She had suffered a miscarriage. Our hearts sank. We rushed to the hospital to find mother-in-law devastated. It was a tough moment for everyone. The room was heavy with grief. Seeing her so heartbroken, I realized just how fragile life can be. This could have been me. This could have been any woman. I sat down next to her and held her hand. No words were needed. In the days that followed, our family grew closer. It took a tragedy to make us all realize how precious family bonds are and how important it is to support one another through thick and thin. Mother-in-law's loss also made me look at my own pregnancy in a new light. It made me realize the gravity of the miracle I was experiencing. Mother-in-law became more involved in my pregnancy. It was as if, through my child, she was finding some solace for her loss. As my due date approached, mother-in-law offered to host a baby shower. I was touched and gladly accepted. The day of the baby shower was beautiful. Mother-in-law had gone all out. She had decorated her house with baby-themed ornaments. There was a gorgeous cake, and the atmosphere was filled with love and joy. During the shower, mother-in-law took the stage. She had a speech prepared. With tears in her eyes, she began, "Today is a day of joy, but it's also a day that reminds me of what I lost. But in this loss, I found something more precious, a connection with my beautiful daughter-in-law and the grandchild she's bringing into this world." She continued, sharing her story and acknowledging the pain both of us went through in our journeys. By the end of her speech, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. That day, our family bonds grew stronger than ever. As days turned into weeks, my due date was finally here. Mother-in-law was by my side along with Mark and my mother. When my baby girl was born, the emotions were indescribable. Holding her in my arms was the culmination of years of heartache and joy. Mother-in-law held her granddaughter with tears streaming down her face. She whispered to me, "Thank you." Our families, though once divided, had come together stronger than ever. In the days to come, we would face the joys and challenges of parenthood and family, but we knew we would face them together. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, our lives settled into a new normal. Mother-in-law was incredibly supportive and seemed to find comfort in spending time with my daughter, whom we named Lily. Mark and I were juggling parenthood, work, and family commitments, but the joy that Lily brought into our lives was indescribable. One day, mother-in-law called and asked if we could come over for dinner. She sounded unusually excited but didn't disclose the reason. We arrived at mother-in-law's house to find her and sister-in-law bustling around the kitchen. The table was set beautifully, and the aroma of the food was tantalizing. After dinner, mother-in-law asked us to join her in the living room. She seemed nervous as she sat down. She began by thanking us for the support we had given her since her miscarriage and expressed how much it meant to her to be involved in Lily's life. Then she took a deep breath and said, "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I want to start a support group for women who have struggled with fertility issues and pregnancy loss." My heart swelled with pride. What a beautiful way to turn pain into something positive. She continued, and I want you to be a part of it. I was overwhelmed with emotion and agreed wholeheartedly. Over the next few weeks, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and I worked tirelessly to set up the support group. We reached out to hospitals, clinics, and used social media to get the word out. The response was amazing. Women from all walks of life reached out to be a part of the group. Our first meeting was emotional. There were tears, hugs, and shared stories of pain and triumph. It was cathartic for all of us, including mother-in-law. The group became an essential part of our lives. Mother-in-law even decided to name it Lily's Blossoms, after my daughter. As the months passed, Lily grew, and so did the bonds within our family. Mark and I navigated the ups and downs of parenthood, and we couldn't have done it without the support of our family. I noticed that even sister-in-law was changing. She became an integral part of the support group and seemed to have gained a deeper understanding of what we had been through. One evening, as the three of us were cleaning up after a support group meeting, sister-in-law pulled me aside. With tears in her eyes, she apologized for how she acted when we first announced our pregnancy. She admitted that she hadn't understood the depths of our struggles. We hugged, and I felt like another chapter was closing, allowing for a new beginning. Our family, though tested through fire, emerged stronger and more connected than ever. I couldn't have imagined that this is where we would end up when we first announced our pregnancy. And as I looked at Lily, I realized that miracles could blossom from the most unexpected places. Months turned into a year. Lily's first birthday was approaching, and it felt like our family's journey had come full circle. We decided to host a garden party for Lily's birthday. Family and friends were invited, including many of the women from Lily's Blossoms support group. The day of the party was perfect. The sun was shining, the garden was in full bloom, and laughter filled the air. As I looked around, I saw how our family tapestry had become richer and more colorful through our trials and triumphs. Mother-in-law was radiant as she carried Lily around, introducing her to everyone as her miracle granddaughter. Sister-in-law had baked a beautiful cake shaped like a blooming lily, symbolizing growth and new beginnings. During the party, we gathered around for speeches. Mark was the first to speak. He thanked everyone for being a part of a journey and expressed his love for our little family. Then it was mother-in-law's turn. She took a deep breath and began by thanking everyone for supporting Lily's Blossoms. She shared how it had changed her life and helped her heal. Then she turned to me, her eyes welling up with tears, and said, "My dearest daughter-in-law, you brought light into my life when I saw only darkness. You showed me what it means to be family. You and Lily are my miracles." As she hugged me, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by how far we had come. After the speeches, I noticed a woman from the support group, Emma, standing alone. I had shared many conversations with her during our meetings. She had faced multiple miscarriages and was trying to conceive through IVF. I approached her, and she hesitantly handed me a small gift. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with tiny charms shaped like lilies. Emma's voice quivered as she said, "This is to thank you. This past year with the support group changed my life, and I want you to know." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." My heart swelled with joy as I hugged her. This was what it was all about: family, support, love, and miracles in all shapes and sizes. As the party drew to a close, the sun began to set. Our family gathered in the garden. We released balloons with messages of love and hope into the sky. I looked at Lily, her eyes wide with wonder, and I made a silent promise to her. I promised to teach her the value of family, the strength in unity, and the magic of compassion. As the balloons floated away, I realized that our tapestry would continue to grow and change, but the threads of love and resilience would always bind us together. This was our legacy, a family reborn through trials and love, and a reminder that miracles blossom in the gardens of the heart. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.